We're currently seeing rapid changes in the higher education landscape of science education. For instance, we see the integration of online, hybrid and collaborative learning, the rise of data-driven learning and assessment, and a shift from students being seen as consumers to students as creators. But the context of the changing science workforce is also just as relevant to what's happening within our higher education institutions. It's important to understand these trends so that we can adapt our own science curriculum to the changing needs of science graduates. The skills expectation of graduates from science degree is vast, and this breadth is a challenge for those designing science degrees. Although technical and disciplinary skills are a critical requirement, the breadth of skill sets increases as we start considering some of the transferable skills that are now being sought by employers. The top 5 skill sets sought by employers that support new graduates to implement the scientific approach in the workplace were found to be interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate both in written and oral form, critical thinking, teamwork, and complex problem solving, where graduates had the ability to use research to inform analysis and their decision making, and finally, scientific thinking. A significant proportion of new recruits in the workforce indicated in research that they felt they had not learnt many of the transferable skills required in the workforce adequately in their degree. This either indicates that graduates are not aware of the skills they're attaining during study, or that the skills they learn are not relevant to the workforce. Employers also report that new science graduates lack many of the skills required in the workforce that they're seeking. The future workforce is also very likely to be very different to the current workforce. A technology-led economy will require high levels of digital literacy. Already there are growing ubiquity of social media, virtual work, coding, etc. that will continue. With this rapid change in digital technology, it will become increasingly easy for our workforce not only to work abroad, but also to work abroad whilst still physically located at home. This decreasing barriers to virtual work mean that there will be increasing job opportunities for our graduates, but also greater competition for work, given the larger international talent pool, often with a willingness to provide labour at a cheaper price. Not only will technology change, but there'll also be new jobs. So together with technological change, automation, changes in legislation, there'll be changes in the business models and how the workforce operates within those. Future jobs will be very different, with almost 40% of jobs today that have a high chance of being replaced with computing. This includes not only the low-skill labour-intensive roles, but also medium to some high skill level jobs. There will be jobs in the future now that don't even exist today. There'll also be greater requirements for flexibility. Job permanency is likely to reduce as part-time, temporary and self-employed work increases. Even now, it's estimated that a graduate is likely to have 5 different careers across 17 employers in one lifetime. There'll be multiple simultaneous sources of income for most graduates, such as many jobs with many employers often at the same time, and this is more likely to become the norm. And this means that graduates will need to be highly flexible and adaptable, highly dynamic, able to manage their own lives, work more autonomously without management oversight, and have entrepreneurial capabilities. There'll also be much more of a focus on transferable skills. With a greater emphasis on autonomous work, graduates of tomorrow will need to be critical and creative thinkers and problem solvers. And to do that, they will need transferable skills. A recent analysis of 4.2 million online job advertisements revealed that transferable skills were as frequently requested as the technical skills, and higher wages were actually being offered where transferable skills were required. Our students will need to understand that the key outcomes of studying science is not only about becoming a scientist, which is just one possible outcome, but also about how they can use their scientific skills beyond science. 30% of graduates gain employment outside of the science field once they graduate in the current workforce environment. 8 years after they graduate, only 50% of graduates are employed in science or technology-related jobs, with the remaining 50% in managerial or other professional work outside of science. Employers outside the science discipline seek science graduates for their scientific thinking skills. That is, the ability to undertake evidence-based inquiry which supports innovation. For example, the 4 most important STEM-based skill sets that are valued by non-STEM employers were active learning, critical thinking, complex problem solving, and creative problem solving. This means that we need to integrate employability and what this means to students in the curriculum so that students are explicitly supported to develop these skills and attributes within their degrees. With such a high percentage of graduates from science degrees not ever working in science or only for a short period, it is important that study options within science degrees address issues of depth as well as breadth. Continuing to give students a wide range of choices is really important, but doing so with clear guidance is really critical. The ability to use their science training across different disciplines within science and more broadly will also be required. At a national level, we also need to respond to the greater breadth of students with a higher range of capabilities entering science degrees as higher education transitions from elite to mass education. This means that preparedness of students starting science degrees is sometimes low. With less control of preparedness of students as they enter university study, information about the cohort must be a critical influence in the design of curriculums. Funding based on student demand will mean that failing to address student diversity will not be institutionally viable in the long term. This is especially the case given the less secure funding of universities nationally. Without addressing diversity explicitly in the curriculum, we also risk perpetuating the low diversity of the current science workforce. This better understanding of the changing landscape of science and science education shows us why we need to design our curriculum in a way that prepares our students for this new world where science will only play an increasingly important part.